guys, from a follow-up from our podcast this week, you guys have a lot of controversy about Airbnbs.
Hostile controversy. They don't like them. Some of them don't like them. Yeah.
No, they don't like them and they don't like investors.
And I don't understand part of that, but we'll talk about it.
We're going to talk about it. A lot of the comments surrounded many people not appreciating Airbnb being in their community. We had a viewer make a statement. Airbnb is contributing to housing inflation by turning a house into a hotel. How many hosts would have to sell if they only made long-term rental revenue? Hosts are making above market returns, which is a major incentive for hosts to over leverage and drive prices higher.
You know, I talked to a lot of investors, and a lot of the investors are just really upset that the government stepped in and prevented them from being paid for a very long time during the pandemic. And the big issue was there was stimulus being paid to these people that weren't paying the rent. And, you know, unemployment, federal unemployment subsidy, I think 3 stimulus checks in a lot of cases. And these landlords were unable to collect their money. So a lot of them were just really upset that they invested in these properties, that they weren't able to get even rid of these non-paying tenants. So a lot of the investors switched over to the short-term rental because, they could not be subjected to this again, right? Not being able to evict tenants should something happen again, but really that there is an upside to it. They can make more money and have less people in their house all of the time.
I think what it comes down to is that the government likes to have control. They like to have their hand in the pot when it comes to any sort of profiting. And they're seeing that this is a huge moneymaker. And
I do want to say too, because this is an issue, right? If you look at, the government stepping in and picking on a set of investors, right? This is never, come on, think about this. This has never been done before that I know of, where the government comes in and says, you're not allowed to be paid. Honestly, that's not right. It's just, it shouldn't be allowed that were to even be a possibility, because the government was certainly printing enough money and making sure that everybody was paid, right? Think about it. People took PPP money, the employers. I didn't, but many did. And I'm not knocking them on that, but I know people that took it that probably shouldn't have. And, a lot of people were taking advantage of it, but to single out and pick on the investor, and I get it, guys, you all are pissed off because home prices are so hot. And the issue is not just the fact that these investors are buying up the homes. I want to be straight and clear. I'm not for Wall Street pooling money together, with SEC filings and taking investor money to buy tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of single family homes. That shouldn't be allowed. But again, the government permits that. So when we come in and we start attacking our small business, our mom and pops, I'm sorry, I have a problem with that, because investors do have a place in the market. Small mom and pop investors that are buying single family homes. You guys aren't looking at it through a clear lens. You're looking at it as you're being slighted because the prices of homes are elevated. Well, you could just not pay that price. You could just decide that you're not going to jump on that bandwagon, right? You could just decide that you're not going to pay that price. But rentals do serve a place and always have served a place in our marketplace. And I think a lot of what we're talking about here really gets down to the brass tacks, that there are bad investors and bad landlords no matter what. I would rather have a short-term rental with a good landlord, right? Let the government impose fines and, fees on bad actors that are destroying the single family communities with noise and not taking care of it. But think about it. How many of you have ever lived next to somebody that's renting a house and it's a complete pigsty, right? And they're in a long-term rental that you can't get them out. At least with a short-term rental, the people are gone in 3 or 4 days. You might be living next to somebody that's there for years, right? With a landlord that doesn't care, number one. And number two, you might be next to a homeowner that is a complete pigsty, and with barking dogs and all kinds of things. At least with the short-term rental, somebody's putting their eyes on it every 3 or 5 or days or a week, every week. The things are getting maintained. The grass is getting cut. Things are neat and orderly, because if they didn't, no one would stay there.
A lot of the conversation in the comments was about why are these homes in suburban areas? And we had a comment. What doesn't make any sense is the explosion of short-term rentals in single-family, residential, non-vacation areas. I don't know why or who is spending hundreds of dollars a night in a typical suburban home. Any area outside of a city doesn't seem sustainable, and it doesn't look like a good business model.
Again, I mean, you know, we're looking at a lot of these short-term rentals were landlords that were burned and said, you know what, I'm going to try a different model here because I have the asset and, you know, and I want to continue to be a landlord. Now you are stepping into a different role because you're actually going in the hospitality business and because, you know, that's a job, right? Cleaning and maintaining and things like that. You have to be a lot more active when you have a short-term rental. But there are a lot of people that are appreciating these short-term rentals in non-vacation areas because a lot of people travel now to visit their parents or visit their family and friends, and it can really, you know, impose on someone. So if you have grandparents that are coming in, they're visiting their kids and grandkids, it's a great place for them to be able to, you know, rent a place that's close by, they're near their family, and that they can actually not put their family out. They can go and visit, they can give them space, and you know, quite honestly, it works out nice.
I agree with you on that. I think anything new, any change that happens, people automatically balk at it. They don't like it. It's uncomfortable for them. But this is what's happening. I mean, there is a boom in the short-term rentals, and there are going to be homes, and there are homes in residential areas. And I think that it's, again, a transition period. Who knows, though, with legislation in different cities, putting regulations in, you know, what's going to happen with the future of this.
And they're banning it. So, and I think that's bad. What we're doing is we're giving up our control. And look, guys, I know by your comments, I mean, some of you are looking at this and you're going, man, this sucks. You know, like I don't want a short-term rental in my neighborhood. But again, you know, you have to look at it through the lens of, you know, you can have a sty in the neighborhood, you know, basically in a long-term rental too. And what you need to really realize is pick your poison, because more investors are buying single-family houses and putting them in your neighborhood, and they're actually building neighborhoods for rentals. So as prices are escalating, if you look at the big picture, the Rent and Be Happy, the World Economic Forum, I mean, you know, let's look at it for what it is. You look at the fact that most of our youth, they're not wanting to buy a house necessarily and stay put for 5, 7, 10, 30 years like my grandparents did. We have to acknowledge that there is a change happening in the marketplace. We have to be careful because that there's a set of rules that's happening that we've watched happen where they're attacking small businesses and letting big corporations take over. So we really have to watch what we're wishing for.
Speaking of the rise in home prices, we did have a question. If income is going to rise to meet house prices, then it would have been better to have bought during the pandemic. And if interest rates are going up, shouldn't it be better to buy now? Or is it going to correct and Fed going to lower rates due to economy crash correcting?
Yeah. So was that a type error, or you think they meant pandemic?
Oh, they meant it.
Yeah. So, and you know, it's interesting because I think a lot of people feel that way.
They do feel that way.
Yeah.
Yep.
So when we talk about the time during the pandemic, if you were to bought back then, as history shows now, you would have had the best of both worlds. Mm-hmm. You would have had prices about 35 to 40% less in a lot of cases than where they are priced at right now. Let's just be conservative and say 30% less if you bought in 2020. And you would have had interest rates that were probably in the high 2s or 3% for 30-year fixed mortgage. So yeah, I guess looking at this, yeah, you would have been better off buying in, you know, that time. The main issue is, you know, do you buy now? And, you know, will prices correct? I think that's happening right here. And will wage growth catch up to housing inflation? And I think it will be the answer to that. Will wages catch up? I don't think so. I think that, you know, and that's been part of my argument when we're talking about needing to have a massive price correction in a lot of ways in certain markets and certain price points. And people can't afford to buy a house. So they have to make a decision. They're either going to remain renters or, you know, they, you know, have to put themselves in a position where they buy and use everything. And then if something were to happen, they risk losing a lot more if they would just stay renting. I think wage growth is actually going to come down, or at least flatten out. And, number one, the Fed said that it is softening. We know that unemployment is going up, and we know that a lot of employers will probably, on a lot of jobs, try and replace some of their employees with less paying jobs. So I don't think that that's the answer. I think the bigger question is, will we see more of a house price correction? And I think the longer that we sustain interest rates that are in the 6, 7, and even 8% for 30-year fixed rate mortgages, I think that we're going to see the downward pressure on home pricing just because they won't be able to sell them. Eventually, it's not going to make sense with the downward pressure on rent prices. It doesn't make sense for the investors to buy them. So we're going to knock out a third of the buyers that we've seen, over the last 5 years or so. About a third of the buyers have been real estate investors. So now the prices don't really make sense for them. And even if they want to take it into a short-term rental, it's very risky in those prices. So now we're limiting in certain price points the audience that would be able to buy in that price point. And I'm talking about the median price, not higher end homes, more the first-time home buyer. That's where we're going to see the most significant downward pressure, or the sellers are just going to have to hold on to them. And that and high-priced homes, houses that are, depending on your market, that are well in the multiple millions. I think we'll see, major price reductions, and we are seeing that.
We are seeing that, yes. So to talk about the downward pressure on pricing, there are still agents that are listing the homes way above what they should be. So here we have a question. Another upsetting factor when I ask about the price and comparable from the listing agent, I get responses like this. Oh, we already have showings and offers. The price is accurate. Then I see it sit for weeks or months. I know they have to operate in the best interest of the seller, but is pushing an unreasonably unaffordable price really in the seller's best interest?
No, and it's really bad right now to do that. If you overprice a house, once it sits on the market, days on market kills really the opportunity to get the highest price possible. You need to make sure that the home is priced with the comparables and even sometimes slightly less to still get those multiple offers where you can get the buyer exuberance up and, end up, with a higher price. But if you're asking for a comparable, if you're looking at a house and you're questioning its price, ask your agent for comparables. Comps is what we like to say in the industry. And your agent should produce that for you. What has sold in the neighborhood in the last 60 to 90 days. You can't go back 6 months anymore because that was a time period that's completely different than now. We usually go back 180 days, but now I'd say 60 to 90 days. That's going to give you neighborhood trends. To show you where the prices are now, what there's closed prices. These are things that have gone to settlement. Doesn't matter what's under contract, doesn't matter what's active. However, it does matter, what inventory is competing, so the active inventory in one metric, you do want to know what else is out there for, comparing house dollar to dollar. And I'll say one last thing with regard to comparables. They have to be in the same subdivision because, as you all know, where you live, if you cross one major intersection, and a lot of agents want to do like a half a mile radius, but you go across a major intersection and it's a complete different neighborhood, a complete different vibe, or architectural setting, you can't do that. You have to stay and look at the comps that are directly in the same subdivision as where you're looking to buy.
So on a past Tuesday Night Live, we were discussing the NAR class action lawsuit. There's actually 2 of them ongoing right now. And you guys had a lot of questions and statements about how you felt about commissions. So we did have a question. Why do sellers pay buyer's agent who works against them? Buyers should pay their own commission. That's the hot topic right now. I mean, that is what a lot of the lawsuit is based on, is that, that the seller felt in this one case that they had to reduce their price by $10,000 in order to sell the house. And first of all, guys, your house is worth what someone's willing to pay. We know that, right? Especially true over the last several years when we watched people compete for what they were willing to pay.
it was even not worth that price in many cases to the appraisers. It was way over the appraised price. So this seller, in the one case that is coming, there's two cases, one this year, one next year. The seller had to drop their price $10,000, and they decided that it was unfair that they had to pay the buyer's agent to actually negotiate against them. And, it comes down to, and watch the podcast if you'd like to see, I break it down pretty well. We can drop the link in the show notes below. But I guess the issue is, that this listener is saying, why would you pay a commission to somebody who's negotiating you? The way it is, long and the short, is that the listing broker is the one that gets the commission negotiated with the seller, right? Commissions are always negotiable. There is no flat rate, across the industry or whatever. Every brokerage could negotiate something individually. That fee then is shared, what we call as a cooperating fee, which we share a portion of our fee. Me as a broker, I share a portion of my fee to a cooperating agent, because that is the requirements. Something I could share $1, but I have to share something in order to be able to list that home on the multiple list. And that's what the other issue is coming from the National Association of Realtors, is that they own these MLSs, right? So if you look at the local board, the federal board, the state board, and the local board, they're the ones that own these multiple listing services, and that's just what they require. So, may things change? I think something's going to change in these lawsuits. But guys, the biggest thing I can tell you is negotiate your commissions.
Mm-hmm. And we had another question about commissions. So we're going to give you a bonus question this week. But this one goes on to say, I always wonder why the agent charges fixed percentage fees for doing the same job on selling a $200,000 house or a $5 million house.
And I guess what they're saying by this is they should charge less on the $5 million house. Well, I can guarantee that it's going to take a lot longer to sell the $5 million house, unless it's a half price at $5 million, than it will a $200,000 house in America. But, so when you're dealing, and every brokerage, again, is different. I mean, we spend, first of all, as a listing company, we spend quite a bit of time and money on bringing a listing to the market. Interview your listing brokers or your agents as representative to the brokerage. And during your process of interviewing the agents, find out what they're going to do for you for the amount of commission that they're charging, right? I know, you can have professional photography, drone videos, 3D tours, a lot of different things, multiple open houses, marketing and advertising campaigns, because I think the biggest thing that the public is so upset about with agents is that many of the agents simply put it on the MLS, which is essentially free to them in their service that they pay, and that's all they do. Mm-hmm. They say it's a waste of time for open houses, which isn't true. Okay. They say that, they're not going to do traditional, brokerage opens where they invite agents on a certain day. We do Wednesdays, give them lunch, let them see the property when it first hits the market. That works. Agents will say that doesn't work. That's not true. And the other thing is, back in the day, agents used to have to pay to advertise, right? You put it on the MLS, but that wasn't enough because, before the internet, we had paper books and listing books. And then we had the little real estate books that were in the sub shops and the grocery stores and things you had to pay. And they were all regional. So if you want to get a bigger audience, you had to put them in multiple books. So there's a lot that has changed. But one thing that hasn't changed is your agent should be pushing it out and boosting it and promoting it, in my opinion, across the social media platforms, which is very expensive. So, when you're looking at, attacking an agent, you're across the board saying that they make too much money. Some of them are very lazy. And some of them do the bare minimum, and their excuse to you is to drop the price where it could be get more eyeballs on the property. So my challenge to you guys, instead of complaining about the commission, ask what is involved and what you get for it.
So there you have it, guys. That's this week's Real Estate Q&A. Thank you so much for tuning in.
This week's Q&A with a bonus.
With a bonus.
All right, if you liked the video, you can let Melissa and I know that you did by hitting that thumbs up.
As always, keep those comments and questions coming in. As you know, maybe next week we'll be reading yours.
Exactly. And if you haven't subscribed to us, go ahead and hit the subscribe button, smash the alert bell. See you next time.
See you next time.
Sachs Realty, Maryland broker number 60772.